Hello, witches and wizards. It's just about time for Halloween, or as I like to call it, Halloween. So I invite you to step inside my haunted house for a spooktacular tour of my Halloween-themed image, Dark Side of the Tomb. So I created Dark Side of the Tomb because I really love Halloween, despite being Australian, and not many people really celebrate it here. But it's my favourite time of the year. If I have the time, I do like to create a Halloween image every year to celebrate. So with Halloween in a couple of weeks, I thought, what a better time to talk about a Halloween image. And so I created this using the invisible person technique that I teach inside Exposing Illusions so that you can create kind of headless people. So let's work through it. All right, so it actually started out with me. The very first thing I did was photograph my poses, and I will show you what that looked like. So basically I was in my living room. I just moved some couches so that I could have a bit of blank wall, and I had a window to the right for some natural light. Now, I wasn't even in the center of this frame, so you can get away with anything when you're shooting poses. Now, I had a slower shutter speed just to capture the movement of the cape. And these are not costumes I got from op shops, actually. These are clothes that I had from back in my goth days. And I made sure to put my hair up in this case because I knew that I would be basically editing out my head. I then went looking for spooky backgrounds in my image library, and not really finding any, I then went and spent an afternoon at a cemetery collecting various location shots. And in the end, I chose an image I took in Glasgow at their necropolis. So this was the image. I cut out the sky, so basically it just left the tombstones behind. Then I added that sky behind, so that was just a sky I'd photographed from my house. Next, I wanted to add some really spooky aspects to the scene. Now, I didn't really come to do this until much later in my process, but I'll show you while we're here. I basically added some flames in. So where is that? There we go. I believe the flames were stock images because I don't have images of fire. That's something I do need to work on. And so I just carefully blended them in. I think I've used the blend mode screen to pop them in and get rid of any of the blackness that was probably behind. Let's actually see if we can have a look at one. So just like that. And then obviously if you've got flames, you need to kind of add some redness into the sky. So I did that too, and that kind of really enhanced the creepy effect a little more. And darken that down to give it much more contrast. And then I added an orange glow. So where I'd masked the sky away, I just added a inner glow just to the edges of everything that had an orangey tone. And then I added more contrast to the foreground because if you had some flames, there would be more kind of light and shade. So that's what I would have been thinking there. So then I just extended that grass because I wanted it to be a square image. So I've obviously just stretched that out, darkened that down a little bit because I wanted it to be nighttime. And this was shot in the day. Popped in a moon that I'd photographed and just did some toning and things to that. And then added some fog. So that is I just painted some grey on a layer and then put that at a low opacity of 25 and kind of masked that in a little bit. So next I added in that main pose I showed you before, so that one there, and I just masked away this hand and my head, as you'll see, and obviously a little bit of this hand too. That will make sense later on. Given her a shadow just on the foot here, so you can see that popping in, and that's just to make her look like she's not floating. Then I put even more of a shadow over here under the cape. This I was just doing some, I think I actually just masked out. Oh no, I'm just doing some stuff with the cape here. Then I've added in a different shot with a lovely flick off to the side, given her her own glow. Now, this is where the effect really comes to life when you're doing invisible people. So right now, it doesn't super look convincing because the neck is just kind of cut out. But if you have a neckline behind, so this effect is called the ghost mannequin technique. It's often used for product photography when they're trying to show you like a shirt or something with nobody inside. So they actually shoot the back of the neck separately and then edit it in to make it look like there's no one inside. Now we get into the pumpkin. So giving her a head, which she will be holding. So now the fingers will make sense shortly. So this, I actually was going to create a jack-o'-lantern in Photoshop myself. I was going to photograph the pumpkin and then cut everything out But in the end, I like to use stock images now and then just to as placeholders to see how things are going to look. But sometimes I really fall in love with the placeholders and then decide to use them. And that's what happened in this case. So I actually was just mucking around with a stock image, I think from Adobe Stock, of a jack-o'-lantern. And I liked it so much that I ended up just keeping it, and that obviously saved me a lot of work. So I gave that a little bit of a glow behind just by using a light yellow and painting behind. Then I did quite a lot of tonal work to the pumpkin, so more contrast, just changing the colors a bit, adding more of a glow, even more. And these are just curves layers, so I was just playing with the exposure. For this, I think I created a glow and then I blurred it to get some movement, so like this. So you probably used a motion blur and maybe some liquify just to give it that kind of streaky shape. And then I just lightened her hand up because presumably if she's holding something that is lit, then the hand would be lit. Then I added in, you may not spot this, but at the neckline here, I added in a spider. That spider, unfortunately, I don't have the original. I do think I have it somewhere. So I photographed that in some kind of museum where they had, insects pinned to a board. So I've popped that into the neckline here. Really then lightened that up, gave it some shading. Next, I started working on this hand. So I think what I've done here, as I did with the neckline, I also had to put the sleeve in. If the hand wasn't going to be there, I still had to give her a sleeve. So that's what I'm working on here. Now, for her hand, my neighbor is a physio and she had a skeleton. So I borrowed the skeleton and I held out the hand and photographed it. I probably have an image of that somewhere too. There we go. So that was obviously a little bit tricky to mask, but that is what I did. Then you can see there was a bit of a mess. It didn't really look realistic, so I've just given her more of a sleeve, put the arm there. So I would have posed with my arm held out like that with a sleeve, and then just kind of removed the hand and replaced it with the skeleton. Lightened everything up, changed the color of her dress, made it more purple, because purple and orange kind of are complementary colors. Then really, really lighten that up with a curves layer. I think that looks cool, makes it more glowy. Then added some glow from the pumpkin to the edges of her dress. Now this is an interesting one. So what I've done here is used an overlay that is of blood. This too is a stock image. I'll see if I can bring that up for you. So it was just some blood spatter, and so I have just popped that over the top of her with the color blend mode. So it's just the blood or the red and with a low opacity. So the blood and then just some more little toning here. Okay, so this is the second skeleton hand. So I did the same as I did before, but this time with the hand held up so that it replaced my hand, and now they're actual skeleton hands, not people hands. Then did some overall toning, just a little bit of changes to her dress. Next, as you see there, I added a glow to her hand. So probably my least favorite thing about this image. I like it at this stage, but there's a point where it starts to look like it's a bit blown out. So I just went a bit too far with that. And that was really to draw attention to the hand to make it look like, hey, I'm inviting you into this scene. And then I added some fog. So that is, again, just some gray painted on a layer. And so like before, because I made the background foggy or smoky probably is what I was going for, I also wanted to put it over her so that made it look like she fit a bit better. Next, we did some work with skulls. So you would have seen a bunch just pop in. So we'll work through them one by one. So you'll see on her cape, I've put a skull here. Really hard to spot. I wanted it to be super subtle, but it's there. So the skulls, I believe, are a stock image as well. And I just cut it out and then turned it into an overlay. So that is on the blend mode. Oh, actually, it is normal, but it's just down on a very low opacity. Then I made another skull and popped it over here. Blurred them up so they weren't so sharp. And just put one over the moon as well to give the moon a little face. And then a really big one here as well. Then I added some swooshes. So I probably just painted some color, like a white on a layer, and then blurred it with some motion blur. So you can see I've got one here, and now there will be one to the main one on the moon. And then just lightened all that up and gave that a bit more contrast. Now I think we get more into the toning because most of our elements are now in place. So I darkened it down, change the color, and that's quite an extreme color change. Makes it definitely look like it's the fire is more realistic. And then I added my toning, and you know how much toning I love to do. So that's really given it this kind of matte look. And if I were to go back in time, maybe I wouldn't tone it this way, but there you have it. Here I was just adding in some more blood. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I'm just making it more obvious on the dress and also on her foot. So now her foot looks quite bloody. This is a bit more horror than I would usually like to go. Then I did a little bit of dodge and burning, so you can see that really brought out the detail in the cape. Then I have kind of lightened up inside the pumpkin, because presumably if it's glowing, it would have an inner glow. This is a smart filter. So what I've done is probably gone into Camera Raw and done a bunch of toning in there. And then, because sometimes I really do like to use Camera Raw to do toning rather than Photoshop. Final color adjustments. Then I added a texture over the scene that you can't see, but it does tie the elements together a little better. And then our final toning. So that is the final image. Now, I did have someone tell me that of all my images, this one they physically hated. So that is the job done, I think. You know, if I'm trying to create a creepy image, I don't want people to like it. I want people to be scared of it. So that's why I really played up, you know, putting the spider on there and the blood and the fire and the skeleton hands. I really wanted it to be as creepy as possible. So the invisible person technique is wonderful for Halloween and one I often reach for. So if you'd love to learn how to make clothes stand by themselves, then pop on into my course Exposing Illusions and I'll show you the specifics of how to shoot and edit this technique. So happy Halloween, my fellow ghouls. I hope you have the most frightful time. Trick or treat.